Holocaust was the persecution and murder of millions of Jews by Hitler's Nazi regime. They believed that the Germans were superior to other races and Jews were inferior.
World War I. July 28, 1914, World War I started. There were so many empires trying to rule over others that it was just so much going on. Each of the empires built up huge armies, but they thought others would be too afraid to fight them. But when it started, they all had their powers and allies. Their allies were Britain, France, Belgium, Italy, Russia, and America, and the central powers are Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and Bulgaria. Most of the allies joined when the war spread across Europe. They had new weapons, engines, machine guns, and airplanes, and many more. There are a myriad amount of deaths. 8.5 million were killed and 21 million were wounded. 750,000 French homes were destroyed, which, being in the trenches and trying to protect from the wars, there was... Oh, shoot, I'm going to stop. Do I just keep going? Okay. The trenches were noisome, and on top of that, the Spanish flu came along and killed another 25 million. The war ended in 1918, and the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1918. Germany ended up having to pay debt for the war guilt, and they finished paying in 2010.
Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles blamed Germany for the war. The Germans were censured. The war guilt clause prevented Germany from prevaricating about starting the war. There was too much evidence against them. Germany had to pay for the damage done to France and Belgium. This ruined their economy. It was also illicit for Germany to form a superstate with Austria. German territory was also given to France, Belgium, Denmark, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. Their military was reduced to a smaller size and lost their tanks and air force. The League of Nations took over an area of Germany to make sure they were under control. The League of Nations was formed to keep world peace. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919.
Germany's hyperinflation of the 1920s. Germany's hyperinflation of the 1920s was caused by the expenses of the loss of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. They had an insufficient amount of money to cover it, so they printed money to cover the expenses, and the more money they printed, the less value it had. Soon prices got more and more high, reaching exorbitant prices, with the marks reaching as high as the 1 billion mark. Trees they cut down for marks had more value than the marks themselves. Printing presses were running 24/7 to keep up with the demand. When people spent their money, they usually did not bother to collect change. They also spent their money right after they got their paycheck, before prices rose even higher. Mark values got so low, in one case, a man who left his suitcase in the streets full of marks, only to find his marks dumped out and his suitcase only stolen. A whole barrel of marks couldn't buy a newspaper. Of persons who worked their whole lives, life savings couldn't even buy a cup of coffee, and to show this inflation, prices just rise so high. The inflation also hurt morals, such as good people would steal valuable objects if they had a chance. Soon a diabolical man named Adolf Hitler made a promise. He promised to get revenge on whoever causes inflation, promised percent compensation to the victims of inflation, and he'll make the economy valuable again. This only gave Hitler power, and he created a Third Reich.
After World War I, the U.S. was highly in debt. Banks crashed and people lost their jobs. By 1932, 20% of the U.S. population was unemployed. This was called the Great Depression. It lasted from 1929 to 1939 and is considered as the U.S.'s longest-lasting economic downturn. President Hoover believed that the Depression would just run its course and soon become dormant. But Franklin D. Roosevelt, once elected in 1933, had different ideas. He aimed to fix things. The Great Depression impacted other countries as well. It fueled the rise of extremist political movements such as Hitler's Nazi regime. Meanwhile, the U.S. still struggled to maintain neutrality. Then, German aggression pulled our country into the war, and businesses started booming. We began manufacturing more weapons and supplies, which provided more jobs. And then, 1935, the Social Security Act was established, providing for unemployed Americans.